The wind howled across the Afghan mountains like a living thing, angry and unpredictable. 37 miles per hour, gusting to 42. The kind of wind that made even the best snipers second-guess their calculations. Forward Operating Base Chapman sat in a valley carved from ancient rock and modern violence. September 2011. The war was in its 10th year and everyone was tired. Tired of the dust, tired of the heat, tired of watching good men come home in boxes or not at all. In a corner of the armory, surrounded by rifles that had seen more combat than most soldiers, a woman worked in silence. Cassandra Brennan, 26 years old. Everyone called her Cass when they bothered to call her anything at all. Most days they just called her the armorer or coffee girl or worse things they thought she couldn't hear. She could hear everything. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency across the Barrett M82A1 laid out before her. Cleaning rod, bore brush, solvent. The ritual of maintenance. Each weapon in this armory was her responsibility, and she treated them with the kind of respect most people reserve for family heirlooms. Because in a way, they were family. Guns had raised her more than people ever did. The door burst open. Master Sergeant Wyatt Dalton strode in, 39 years old and built like he'd been carved from the same mountains surrounding the base. Behind him, 4 operators limped through the entrance, blood on their uniforms, exhaustion in their eyes. "Brennan!" Dalton's voice cut through the room like a knife. "We need these rifles cleaned and zeroed. Now!" She didn't look up. "Yes, Sergeant. And get us some coffee while you're at it. Real coffee, not that instant crap." One of the other operators laughed. "Come on, Barbie, make yourself useful." She set down the cleaning rod, slowly, deliberately. Then she stood and walked past them without a word, heading for the small kitchenette at the back of the armory. They always did this, every single time. 6 months she'd been assigned to this unit, and 6 months they'd treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was a mascot, a joke. The girl who cleaned the guns and poured the coffee. She made the coffee, strong and black the way they liked it, brought it to them in silence while they complained about the mission, about the terrain, about the equipment that somehow always failed them at the worst possible moments. "These scopes are off," Dalton said, examining his rifle. "How many times do I have to tell you? Precision matters." "The scopes are calibrated correctly, Sergeant." He looked at her like she just suggested the earth was flat. "Are you questioning my assessment?" "No, Sergeant." "Then fix them." She took the rifles, all 5 of them, carried them to her workbench and began the process she'd already completed twice this week, checking zero, adjusting windage, confirming elevation. Everything was exactly where it should be, but she'd do it again, because that was her job. Keep the weapons perfect, keep her head down, and wait. Wait for what, she wasn't entirely sure. But her grandfather had taught her patience above all else. Patience and preparation. The 2 pillars of marksmanship, he used to say. The 2 pillars of life. The operators left. The armory fell silent again, except for the distant thrum of generators and the occasional crack of gunfire from the training range. Cass returned to her work, but her mind drifted. It always did in these quiet moments. Back to Montana, back to the ranch, back to the old man who'd shaped her into something these men couldn't begin to understand. 15 years earlier, Montana high country, where the mountains touched the sky and the nearest neighbor was 10 miles away. "Breathe, Cassandra." The voice came from beside her, low and steady. Colonel Samuel Flint Brennan, retired Marine. 73 years old and still straight-backed as a rifle barrel. She was 11, small for her age, with her grandfather's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw. The rifle in her hands was almost as long as she was tall. "Feel the wind," he continued. "Don't fight it. Understand it." The target sat 800 yards downrange. A steel plate 12 inches across. Impossible for most shooters at this distance. Child's play for Flint. He was teaching her to make it child's play for her, too. "Wind's coming from your right. 4 o'clock, maybe 7 miles per hour. What does that mean?" She closed her eyes, feeling it on her face, smelling the sage and pine it carried. "Bullet will drift left." "How much?" 3 inches, maybe 4. "At this distance?" She recalculated. 6 inches. "Good. Now, What else affects the shot? Gravity. Bullet drops over distance. How much? Her young mind worked through the mathematics her grandfather had drilled into her since she was old enough to hold a calculator. 180 inches, 15 feet. And? She thought harder. There was something else, something he'd mentioned last week. The Earth. It's spinning. She could hear the smile in his voice even though she couldn't see it, her eyes still closed, still feeling the wind. The Coriolis effect. Most shooters never think about it. At 800 yards, it barely matters. But at 2,000, 3,000, it matters a hell of a lot. He adjusted her position slightly, elbow tucked in, cheek against the stock. In Korea, I made a shot at 2,100 yards, saved my spotter's life. Took me 40 minutes to line it up. I had to account for wind, drop, temperature, even the altitude. But the most important thing? What? Patience. Waiting for the moment when everything aligned, when the wind settled, when the target stopped moving, when my heart beat steady and slow. He paused. You can have all the skill in the world, but without patience, you're just wasting ammunition. She opened her eyes, settled her breathing, found the rhythm her grandfather had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, controlled. The crosshairs settled on the target. She compensated for wind, for drop, for every variable she could calculate. Then she waited. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. Between the third and fourth, in that moment of absolute stillness, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The bullet flew downrange, covering 800 yards in just over a second. And the steel plate rang like a bell. Flint said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, "You're going to be better than me someday." She didn't believe him. Not then. But he believed it. And he spent the next 14 years proving it. The memory faded. Cass found herself staring at the rifle in her hands, the one she'd been cleaning while her mind wandered. How many times had she done this? Cleaned weapons while remembering the lessons her grandfather had taught her. The lessons no one here knew she'd learned. She'd won 7 long-range shooting championships between 2004 and 2010. Under different names, different aliases. Because the few times she'd mentioned her skills in the army, she'd been laughed out of the room. So she'd stopped mentioning them, stopped trying to be seen. The armory door slammed open again, jerking her fully back to the present. This time it was Corporal Finn Ashford, 23 and still young enough to look at the world like it might make sense someday. "Brennan, Colonel Garrett wants everyone in the briefing room. Now." She set down the rifle she'd been cleaning. "What's happening?" "Dunno, but it's bad. Real bad." The briefing room was packed. Every operator on the base, it seemed. Standing room only. The air thick with tension and the smell of gun oil and stale coffee. Colonel Vincent Garrett stood at the front, 52 years old, with the kind of face that had seen too much and remembered all of it. Behind him, a map of the region lit up on a screen, red markers, hostile positions, and one blue marker, isolated and alone. "Listen up," Garrett's voice cut through the murmurs. 3 hours ago, CIA contractor Graham Aldridge was taken by Taliban forces operating in the Kunar province. A satellite image appeared on screen, a compound carved into a mountainside, surrounded by jagged peaks and deep valleys. Aldridge was conducting intelligence operations near the Pakistani border. His convoy was ambushed. 6 Afghan National Army personnel killed. Aldridge is being held by a Taliban commander named Rashid Azimi. Another image, a bearded man in traditional clothing, holding an AK-47, staring at the camera with the kind of hatred that transcends language. Azimi has made his intentions clear. He plans to execute Aldridge on camera. He's given us 12 hours before the video goes live across every extremist website on the planet. The room went cold. Everyone knew what that meant. Not just for Aldridge, but for American credibility, for morale, for the families watching at home. "We have no negotiation leverage," Garrett continued. "Azimi isn't interested in prisoners. He wants a propaganda victory. He wants to show the world that Americans die badly in his mountains." Dalton spoke up from the front row. "Rules of engagement, sir?" Eliminate Azimi. Extract Aldridge. No collateral damage to civilian structures. Garrett's jaw tightened. Command has denied airstrike authorization. Weather system moving in, plus the compound is too close to a refugee settlement. One errant bomb and we create 50 more Azimis. He zoomed in on the map. A ridgeline, clearly marked. Then another position, nearly 4 miles away. Azimi is coordinating from this position. He moves constantly, never stays in one place more than 20 minutes. He knows we're watching. He's got 6 bodyguards acting as human shields, and he's positioned himself exactly 4,200 yards from our nearest possible overwatch position. Silence. 4,200 yards, almost 2.5 miles. The kind of distance that existed in record books and war stories, not in actual operational reality. Dalton. Garrett's eyes found the master sergeant. You're our best long-range shooter. What's your assessment? Dalton stood, moving to examine the map more closely. His face was stone, but Cass could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. She'd watched him shoot. He was good. Very good. But 4,200 yards? My personal record is 2,100 yards, sir. Confirmed kill in Helmand Province, 2009. He studied the terrain. 4,200 is... That's outside the effective range of almost every weapon system we have available. Can you make the shot? A pause. Too long. Then, I can try, sir. That's not what I asked. Yes, sir. I can make the shot. Garrett nodded. You have 2 hours to get in position. After that, Azimi may move the hostage deeper into the cave system, and we lose any chance of extraction. He looked around the room. Questions? No one spoke. What was there to say? It was a nearly impossible shot, but it was the only option they had. Dismissed. Dalton, select your spotter and equipment. Move out in 30 minutes. The room emptied quickly. Operators heading to gear up, running through checklists, preparing for what might be a disaster. Cass stood to leave, but something made her stay. She moved to the map, studying it while the room cleared out. The distances, the terrain, the wind patterns she'd been tracking for 3 days as part of her routine weather monitoring. 4,200 yards. Her grandfather's record had been 3,800. Classified mission, classified location, sometime in 1967. He'd never told her the details, but he'd shown her the calculations, walked her through every variable, made her understand what it took to send a bullet almost 2.5 miles and still hit exactly what you aimed at. She dreamed about making a shot like that, practiced the math, calculated the tables, built rifles specifically designed for extreme long-range work. In civilian competitions across Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, she'd won championships at distances that made military snipers shake their heads. But no one here knew that. No one asked. To them, she was just the girl who cleaned the guns. Behind her, Garrett's voice. Something on your mind, specialist? She turned. The colonel stood alone now, arms folded, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. The Barrett M82A1. That's what Sergeant Dalton will use? It's our most powerful long-range platform. She nodded slowly. It's a .50 caliber, devastating impact. But at 4,200 yards, the round will be subsonic by the time it reaches target. Accuracy degrades significantly past 2,500 yards. Garrett's eyebrows rose slightly. You seem to know a lot about ballistics for an armorer. It's my job to know the capabilities of every weapon system on this base, sir. Fair enough. He turned back to the map. But that's what we have to work with, unless you've got a better suggestion. She did, but saying it out loud meant crossing a line she'd avoided for 6 months. Meant making herself visible in a way that invited mockery, dismissal, or worse. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. When your moment comes, trust your training. Case 7, sir, in the auxiliary storage. Case 7? Chi-Tac M200 intervention, 408 caliber. I've been maintaining it as a backup long-range system. It's not as powerful as the Barrett, but it maintains accuracy at extreme distances, specifically designed for shots beyond 3,000 yards. Garrett studied her for a long moment. And you know this because? Because I requested it 6 months ago when I arrived. for exactly this kind of scenario. Requested it for Dalton to use? The moment stretched out. Truth or lie? Safety or risk? No, sir. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Stand by, specialist. Don't go anywhere. He walked out, leaving her alone with the map and the awful weight of what she'd just implied. 2 hours later, the observation post overlooked a valley that could have been beautiful if it wasn't trying to kill everyone in it. Dalton lay prone behind the Barrett, eye to the scope, making micro adjustments. His spotter called out wind speed, direction, temperature, all the variables that mattered at extreme range. Cass stood 30 feet back, technically there to support equipment needs, really there to watch her weapons perform. That's what she'd told herself anyway. The wind howled, 37 miles per hour, gusting higher. Dalton's finger moved to the trigger, squeezed. The Barrett roared. The bullet flew downrange, taking almost 6 seconds to cover the distance. Long enough to think, long enough to hope. Through spotting scopes, they watched the impact. 15 feet left of target. Dust cloud where the bullet struck rock. Wind pushed it, the spotter said. Adjust 2 minutes right. Dalton made the correction, settled in, fired again. 10 feet short. Bullet drop exceeding calculations. Temperatures dropping, the spotter called out. Affects the ballistic coefficient. Add 1 minute elevation. Third shot. Fourth shot. Fifth shot. Each one close. Each one not close enough. Azimi moved between shots, never staying still long enough to present a clean target for more than a few seconds. Like he knew someone was trying to kill him from miles away and was determined not to make it easy. An hour passed. Then 90 minutes. 15 shots fired, 15 shots wasted. Dalton slammed his fist into the rock beside him. I can't get a read on the wind at this range. It's shifting every 3 seconds. The bullet's in the air for almost 6 seconds. By the time it gets there, everything's changed. Garrett's voice crackled over the radio. Viper 1, status? No joy, sir. I can't make the shot. Static. Then, stand by. The silence that followed was worse than any explosion. Every operator at the observation post knew what it meant. An American was going to die on camera. The mission was failing, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Cass moved forward, past the other operators, past the spotters and the equipment and the growing sense of defeat. She stood at the edge of the observation post, looking out at the ridgeline where Azimi moved like a ghost between rocks. 4,200 yards. Her grandfather's voice. You're going to be better than me someday. She turned to face Dalton, faced all of them. Sir, she said, her voice cutting through the wind, I can make that shot. For 3 seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the laughter started. Not mean laughter exactly, more like the laughter of exhausted men hearing something so absurd it broke through their despair for just a moment. Dalton turned around, his face a mask of disbelief. Excuse me? I can make that shot, she repeated, calmer now, certain. The shot I just missed 15 times. His voice dripped with something between amusement and anger. The shot that's outside the effective range of this weapon system. The shot that requires calculations I've been working on for 2 hours. You think you can just walk up here and... Yes. The laughter stopped, because she hadn't smiled, hadn't blinked, hadn't shown even a flicker of doubt. Corporal Ashford spoke up from the back. Sergeant, maybe we should... Should what? Dalton's attention snapped to the younger man. Let the coffee girl take over? This is combat operations, not a feel-good training exercise. With respect, Sergeant, Cass said quietly, I'm not asking for permission. I'm volunteering for the mission. On what authority? You're not qualified, you're not trained, you're not... An operator. I know. She met his eyes without flinching. But I am a shooter, and I can make that shot. Garrett's voice cut through the radio. What the hell is going on up there? Dalton grabbed the radio. Colonel, Specialist Brennan is... She's requesting to take the shot. Silence on the other end. Long enough that Cass thought maybe the radio had cut out. Then, put her on. Dalton handed her the radio like it might explode. Specialist Brennan, this is Colonel Garrett. You understand what you're asking? Yes, sir. You understand that Sergeant Dalton, one of the most experienced snipers in Special Operations Command, has been unable to make this shot. Yes, sir. And you believe you can? I don't believe, sir. I know. Another pause. On what basis? This was it, the moment where everything changed or everything ended. My grandfather, sir. Colonel Samuel Brennan, United States Marine Corps, retired 1972, Korea, and classified Cold War operations after that. She heard something shift in Garrett's voice. Flint Brennan? Yes, sir. He trained me from the time I was 8 years old until he passed in 2009. Long-range marksmanship was his specialty. His record shot was 3,800 yards, classified mission 1967. She paused. He taught me to beat it. The silence stretched so long she thought she'd lost him. Then, Dalton, give her one attempt. If she misses, you take back over. But we're running out of time and out of options. Brennan, you get one shot. Make it count. The radio clicked off. Dalton stared at her like she'd just grown a second head. Around them, the other operators watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. You're serious, Dalton said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Sergeant. He stepped aside, gesturing to the rifle with exaggerated theatrics. By all means, Princess. She didn't respond, didn't react, just moved to the firing position and immediately shook her head. Problem? Dalton's voice was sharp. The Barrett's effective range is 1,800 meters. Power isn't the issue at this distance. Precision is. She turned to Ashford. Case 7. The Shytac M200 I modified. It's in the auxiliary transport. Can you retrieve it? Ashford looked at Dalton. Dalton looked at Garrett's last position. Then slowly, he nodded. 5 minutes later, Cass was lying prone behind a weapon that looked almost alien. Massive. Purpose-built. The Shytac M200 intervention. Modified over 6 months of careful work. Custom barrel, specialized scope, a suppressor the length of her forearm. She began her calculations. Distance, 4,217 yards. Elevation change, 340 feet. Temperature, 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Dropping. Humidity, 23%. Wind, 37 miles per hour at ground level, gusting to 42. Dalton folded his arms. We already calculated all of that. You calculated based on ground level wind readings, she said, not looking up from her tablet. At this distance, the bullet will pass through at least 6 different wind layers, each with different speeds and directions. Silence. She continued working. Her fingers moved across the tablet, running calculations that looked like advanced physics equations, because that's exactly what they were. Additionally, at 4,200 yards, Coriolis drift becomes significant. Earth's rotation will push the bullet approximately 31 inches to the right during flight time. Dalton stared. How do you even know that? Physics, Sergeant. The bullet will be in the air for 5.8 seconds. The Earth rotates at roughly 1,000 miles per hour at this latitude. The math isn't complicated, it's just something most people don't think about. She looked up at him. My grandfather made me calculate Coriolis drift for every shot over 2,000 yards, for 14 years, until I could do it in my head. She returned to her scope. Now please be quiet, I need to concentrate. The minutes stretched like hours. Cass lay perfectly still, her breathing slow and controlled, her eye never leaving the scope. She was watching Azimi, tracking his movements, calculating the patterns. Every 20 minutes he moved. But within those 20 minutes, he had a rhythm. 4 minutes in one position, 3 minutes moving, 5 minutes in the next position. She was looking for the window, the moment when he'd be still, exposed, and vulnerable. Behind her, the entire team had gone silent. Even Dalton had stopped making comments. There was something about the absolute focus radiating from this woman that commanded a different kind of respect. Not the respect of rank or authority, but the respect given to someone who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. Garrett's voice crackled over the radio. Viper 1, status. We have 10 hours and 43 minutes until the execution deadline. Cass didn't respond. Couldn't respond. She was in that place her grandfather had taught her to find. the place where nothing existed except the shot, where the world contracted down to wind and distance and the slow, steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. She watched the wind indicators she'd mentally mapped across the terrain. Grass movements at different elevations, dust patterns, heat shimmer variations, each one telling her something about the invisible currents of air between her and the target. Every few seconds, she made micro adjustments to her scope, tiny movements, fractions of a millimeter that would translate to feet at the target end. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only observation, only patience. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Target is stationary. Window is approximately 4 seconds. Her finger moved to the trigger. For Cassandra Brennan, time itself seemed to slow down. She could feel her heartbeat. 62 beats per minute, steady, strong. She waited for the space between beats, the moment of absolute stillness that her grandfather had taught her to find, the moment when the body was perfectly calm. His voice echoed in her memory as clear as if he were lying beside her. When everything goes quiet, when the world holds its breath, that's when you take the shot. She exhaled halfway, held it, and squeezed. The Shytac roared. A .408 caliber bullet erupted from the barrel at 3,000 feet per second, beginning its incredible 4,217-yard journey through the Afghan sky. Cass didn't move, didn't breathe. She counted in her head, 1, 2, 3. The bullet traveled through the first wind layer, pushed slightly left, compensated by the initial aim adjustment. 4. Through the second layer, different wind direction, the bullet's path curved minutely. 5. Gravity pulled. The bullet dropped, but the elevation adjustment accounted for it. The trajectory was perfect. 5.7. The Earth's rotation nudged the bullet right, 31 inches, just as calculated. The windage adjustment compensated perfectly, 5.8. 4,217 yards away, on a ridgeline carved from ancient stone, Rashid Azimi's head snapped backward. He crumpled. Didn't move again. At the observation post, dead silence. Then, pandemonium. Holy, did she... Confirm, I need confirmation. Dalton grabbed his binoculars, staring at the distant ridgeline where the terrorist commander now lay motionless. His face had gone completely white. 4,200 yards, he whispered. She just made a 4,200-yard shot on a target that was only visible for 4 seconds. He turned to look at Cass, who was calmly chambering another round, her eyes still pressed to the scope. She'd already moved on to the next problem. 3 hostiles remaining near the hostage position, she said, her voice perfectly calm. Ranges, 1,200 yards, 1,340 yards, 1,480 yards. Garrett's voice came through the radio, crackling with something that might have been shock. Authorized. Take them. Boom. 1 down. Boom. 2 down. Boom. 3 down. 45 seconds. 3 shots, 3 kills, at ranges that most snipers would consider challenging but manageable. For Cass, after making a 4,200-yard shot, they were almost insultingly easy. Rescue team, move in, Garrett ordered. All hostile threats neutralized. The team moved, fast and efficient, down the valley and toward the compound. Without return fire, without resistance, they reached the structure in 8 minutes. And at the observation post, 20 hardened special operations soldiers stood in absolute silence, staring at the woman who'd just done something they'd all believed was impossible. Dalton stood closest. His expression had gone through disbelief, through shock, and landed somewhere near awe. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Cass finally looked up from her scope, met his eyes. And for the first time in 6 months, she didn't look away first. Someone who's been waiting for the shot that matters. The radio crackled to life. "Viper Actual, we have a problem." Garrett's response was immediate. "Say again?" "Enemy QRF inbound. 12 vehicles, approximately 60 fighters approaching from the northeast. Our rescue team is exposed. Extraction assets are 20 minutes out. Garrett's blood ran cold. The rescue team was still moving Aldridge to the extraction point. If those vehicles reached the compound, everyone would die. Before anyone could respond, Cass was already moving, ejecting the magazine, checking the chamber. Her hands moved with the kind of speed that comes from muscle memory so deep it's practically instinct. Sergeant, she said, looking at Dalton, I fired 4 consecutive shots. Barrel temperature is elevated. I need my second barrel. It's in case 7. Dalton stared at her. You have a second barrel? Pre-zeroed, calibrated, ready to install. Jesus Christ. He turned to Ashford. You heard her. Move. 2 minutes later, with a fresh barrel installed and the rifle re-zeroed, Cass was back in position, watching through her scope as 12 vehicles approached in a convoy formation, 60 fighters, coming fast. The rescue team's voice came over the radio. We need fire support. We're exposed and extracting a wounded package. Cannot engage that many hostiles. Garrett's response was grim. Air support is 25 minutes out. Viper 1, can you engage? Cass was already calculating. Lead vehicle at 3,800 yards and closing. I can disable them, sir. Box them in. You can't engage 12 vehicles with a sniper rifle, Dalton said. It wasn't an argument. It was just statement of fact. You're one person with one gun. She looked at him. My grandfather once held off a Chinese assault for 40 minutes in Korea. 27 confirmed kills. He taught me that one shooter in the right position is worth a platoon in the wrong one. She returned to her scope. I'll hit the lead vehicle first, then the rear vehicle. Box them in. Make them predictable. Garrett's voice. Authorized. Engage at will. Cass settled into position, controlled her breathing, found that place of absolute calm, and fired. The lead truck's engine exploded in a shower of sparks and smoke. The vehicle swerved violently off the road, the driver fighting to control it before it slammed into a boulder. Chamber. Acquire. Fire. The rear vehicle's fuel tank ruptured. Flames erupted. The vehicle behind it slammed on brakes, nearly colliding. The convoy was trapped, boxed in between 2 disabled vehicles on a narrow mountain road. Cass worked methodically, her face utterly calm, her hands absolutely steady. One by one, she disabled every vehicle in the convoy. Engine blocks, fuel tanks, tire assemblies. Each shot at ranges exceeding 3,000 yards. 12 vehicles, 12 perfect shots. The enemy fighters poured out of their disabled trucks, confused and exposed. They'd expected an ambush, maybe an IED, not surgical precision from miles away. And that's when the rescue team's supporting fire ripped through them. Caught in the open, disorganized, they never stood a chance. 20 minutes later, Graham Aldridge was aboard an extraction helicopter, alive, unharmed except for some bruises and dehydration. The mission was complete. As the helicopter disappeared into the distance, Garrett stood at the observation post, watching Cass methodically break down the Shytac, cleaning it, storing it, treating it with the same quiet respect she'd shown every weapon in her care for 6 months. Dalton approached the colonel. His voice was low. Sir, I've been doing this for 17 years. I've seen some incredible shooting, but that, he shook his head, that was something else. Garrett nodded slowly. Colonel Samuel Brennan. I knew him. Korea. He saved my father's life at Chosin Reservoir, winter of 1952. My father was a lieutenant. Surrounded. Flint Brennan was on overwatch. Held off an entire Chinese platoon long enough for the evacuation. He looked at Cass. I heard stories about him my whole life. About his patience, his precision, the way he could make shots that shouldn't have been possible. He paused. I guess the legend lives on. Dalton was quiet for a moment. Then, we owe her an apology. Hell, I owe her about 1,000 apologies. Yes, Garrett said. You do. As the sun set over the Afghan mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Cassandra Brennan sat alone at the observation post. The others had moved out, heading back to base. She held her grandfather's leather notebook, worn, weathered, a weight in her hands that felt heavier than any rifle. Tomorrow, she'd read it properly. Tonight, she just needed to hold it. 4 men dead by her hand. Dozens of Americans alive because of it. The mathematics was simple, even if the emotions weren't. She closed her eyes and let the Afghan wind wash over her. Somewhere in that wind, she swore she could hear her grandfather's voice. When your moment comes, trust your training. She had, and everything had changed. She stood, packed away the notebook, and walked back toward the base, the setting sun at her back and the weight of history on her shoulders. Behind her, on that ridgeline 4,200 yards away, the wind continued to howl. But for Cassandra Brennan, everything had finally gone quiet. The stars over Afghanistan were different from Montana stars, sharper somehow, colder, like they were watching from a greater distance, observing but never interfering.
Cass sat outside the armory, her back against the corrugated metal wall, the Shytac disassembled on a tarp in front of her. Even after what she'd done today, the ritual of cleaning remained. Maybe especially after what she'd done today. 4,217 yards. The number kept running through her mind. Not with pride exactly, more like confirmation, like finally receiving an answer to a question she'd been asking for 14 years. Her grandfather had been right. She was better than him. The thought should have brought satisfaction. Instead, it brought a hollow ache, because he wasn't here to see it. Wouldn't ever know that his endless hours of teaching had produced exactly what he'd predicted. Brennan? She looked up. Dalton stood 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, looking more uncomfortable than she'd ever seen him. Behind him, the rest of his team lingered at a respectful distance. Sergeant? He moved closer, slowly, like approaching a spooked horse. I need to say something. You don't owe me anything. Yeah, I do. He crouched down, meeting her at eye level. For 6 months, I treated you like you were invisible. Made jokes, called you names. He paused. You could have told us who you really were at any time. Could have shut us all up with one trip to the range. Would you have believed me? He thought about that. Probably not. Then what would have been the point? Dalton nodded slowly. Fair enough. He watched her hands work, cleaning the bolt assembly with practiced efficiency. Where did you learn to shoot like that? And don't just say your grandfather. That level of skill doesn't come from genetics. 14 years, she said simply. Every weekend, every leave, every spare moment. Civilian long-range competitions from Colorado to Washington State. 7 championships between 2004 and 2010. She looked up at him. Under different names, different aliases. Because the few times I mentioned my shooting skills in the Army, I got laughed out of the room. So you stopped trying to prove it. I stopped trying to prove it to people who'd already decided what I was capable of. She set down the bolt. My grandfather taught me that respect isn't given, it's earned. But he also taught me that you can't earn respect from people who refuse to see you. She paused. So I stopped trying to be seen. Figured someday the moment would come where being invisible didn't matter anymore. Today was that moment. Today was that moment. Dalton stood, extended his hand. Tomorrow morning, I'm requesting that you be assigned to our tactical team as a designated marksman, if you'll accept. She looked at his hand, at the genuine respect in his eyes. Then she shook it. On one condition, Sergeant. Name it. You call me Brennan or Cass or even Specialist, but never Barbie, never Sweetheart, never Coffee Girl. A smile ghosted across his face. How about steady? Because watching you work today, that's what you are. Steadiest damn shooter I've ever seen. She considered that. I can live with steady. Good. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Tomorrow, Colonel Garrett wants a full debrief. You'll need to walk us through every calculation, every adjustment, everything that went into those shots. Because Command is going to want to know how the hell you did what you did. After he left, Cass returned to her cleaning, but her hands had started shaking. Just slightly, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. The weight of what she'd done settling in. She'd killed 4 men today, ended 4 lives with surgical precision from distances most people couldn't even comprehend. Graham Aldridge was alive because of her. The rescue team had come home safe. 4 enemies eliminated, dozens of allies protected. The mathematics was simple, even if the emotions weren't. She finished cleaning the rifle, packed it away, and walked back to her quarters, where sleep would not come easy. The debriefing room was packed, not just with Garrett's command staff, but with intelligence officers, analysts, even a 2-star general who'd flown in from Bagram specifically for this. Cass stood at the front, a laser pointer in her hand, the satellite imagery of yesterday's operation displayed on the screen behind her. She'd been talking for 45 minutes, walking them through the mathematics, the atmospheric calculations, the ballistic coefficients, showing them the wind layers, the Coriolis compensation, the way she'd accounted for every variable. The general, a man named Hartwell with 30 years of combat experience etched into his face, held up a hand. Specialist Brennan, let me make sure I understand. You're telling me that a 4,000-yard shot requires accounting for the rotation of the Earth? At that distance, yes, sir. The Coriolis effect becomes significant. At our latitude, approximately 41 degrees north, the drift is roughly 31 inches to the right for every mile of flight. Since the bullet traveled nearly 2.5 miles, the total drift was approximately 77 inches. 6.5 feet. Yes, sir. Hartwell leaned back in his chair. And you calculated this in your head? My grandfather made me calculate it for every long-range shot I took for 14 years. Eventually, the math becomes automatic. Show me. She blinked. Sir? The calculation. Show me how you do it, right now. No tablet, no calculator. The room went silent, every eye on her. Distance, 2,000 yards. Wind, 8 miles per hour from 3 o'clock. Temperature, 70 degrees. Sea level. 408 Chi-Tak round. Calculate the shot. Her mind went to work. Numbers flowing like water through channels worn deep by repetition. Wind drift at 2,000 yards, approximately 18 inches. Drop compensation, 160 inches. Coriolis drift, negligible at that range, maybe 2 inches. Total windage adjustment, 0.4 milliradians right. Total elevation adjustment, 5.3 milliradians up. She'd said it in less than 10 seconds. Hartwell looked at his intelligence officer, who'd been frantically working a calculator. The officer nodded slowly. She's within 0.1 milliradians on both axes, sir. Jesus Christ. Hartwell stood, walked to the front of the room, and extended his hand. Specialist Brennan, that was the most impressive demonstration of applied mathematics under pressure I've ever witnessed. She shook his hand, uncomfortable with the attention. It's just practice, sir. No, it's gift, combined with an extraordinary amount of practice. He turned to Garrett. Colonel, I want Specialist Brennan attached to JSOC operations immediately. We've got 3 high-value targets in the region that conventional assets can't reach. If she can replicate yesterday's performance, we can turn the tide on multiple operations. Garrett nodded. Already in progress, sir. I've reassigned her to our tactical element effective immediately. Good. Hartwell looked back at Cass. One question, though. Yesterday you made 4 shots in combat conditions. The first was 4,200 yards. The next 3 were significantly closer. How do you manage the mental transition from extreme long range to medium range? It's not really a transition, sir. Once you can calculate for extreme range, everything closer becomes simpler. Fewer variables, less time for drift and drop to accumulate. She paused. My grandfather used to say that if you can hit a target at 3,000 yards, hitting one at 1,000 is like taking a breath. And the emotional aspect, taking a human life from that distance? The room waited for her answer. This was the question they all wanted to ask, but hadn't. My grandfather served in Korea, sir. Chosin Reservoir. He told me that every shot he took, he thought about the Marines he was protecting. The men who'd go home to their families because of his actions. She met Hartwell's eyes. Yesterday, I thought about Graham Aldridge, about the rescue team, about their families. I didn't take 4 lives, sir. I saved dozens. Hartwell studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good answer, specialist. Good answer. The debriefing continued for another hour. Questions about equipment, about training protocols, about whether her techniques could be taught to other snipers. Cass answered everything as honestly as she could, though she suspected that much of what she did was the result of a childhood most people couldn't replicate. You couldn't recreate 14 years of training in Montana high country. Couldn't replicate a grandfather who'd been a living legend and dedicated his retirement to creating another one. When it finally ended, Garrett asked her to stay behind. Walk with me, he said. They left the building, heading toward the perimeter of the base. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and gray in the afternoon light. Somewhere out there, the war continued. But for the moment, in this small bubble of safety, there was quiet. I knew your grandfather, Garrett said after they'd walked for a minute in silence. I don't know if Dalton told you. He mentioned something, sir. Chosin Reservoir, winter of 1952. Coldest winter Korea had seen in decades. My father was a lieutenant, leading a platoon that got cut off during the retreat. Chinese forces everywhere. They should have died. He paused. Flint Brennan was on a ridgeline, solo. His spotter had been killed 2 days earlier. He held that ridge for 6 hours, 27 confirmed kills, gave my father's platoon time to withdraw. Cass said nothing. She'd heard the story, but never with this much detail. When they finally got back to friendly lines, my father went looking for the man who'd saved them. Found Flint cleaning his rifle. Asked him how he'd done it. You know what your grandfather said? What, sir? He said patience is a weapon most soldiers don't know how to use. He said the Chinese kept coming because they thought they were facing a platoon. But it was just him. One man. Making every shot count. Garrett looked at her. My father passed in 1978. Heart attack. But until his last day, he never stopped telling me about Flint Brennan, the man who saved his life. His voice softened. He made me promise that if I ever had the chance, I'd thank him. I never got to. So I'm thanking you. Her throat felt tight. Thank you, sir. There's something else. Garrett pulled a folder from under his arm. Your grandfather's classified service record. Operations between 1955 and 1972. Cold War stuff. Most of it's still sealed, but I pulled some strings. He handed her the folder. The shot you beat yesterday. 3,800 yards. It was in East Germany, 1967. Counter-Soviet operation. He eliminated a KGB officer who was coordinating with terrorist cells targeting American installations. Garrett smiled slightly. The shot was impossible. The conditions were worse than yesterday. But he made it anyway. Cass opened the folder, saw her grandfather's face in a photo from 1967. Young, serious, the same gray eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. There's more, Garrett continued. After that shot, they wanted to make him an instructor, bring him stateside, have him train the next generation of snipers. He refused, said he wasn't done in the field yet. Served 5 more years before finally retiring. He paused. I think he was waiting for something, or someone. I think maybe he knew that his real legacy wouldn't be the soldiers he could train in the army. It would be you. The weight of those words settled over her like a blanket, heavy but not unwelcome. He never talked much about his service, Cass said quietly. Only what was relevant to training me, the technical aspects, the mathematics. That was his way. My father said the same thing. Flint Brennan was the quietest professional anyone had ever met. Did his job, did it better than anyone else, and never asked for recognition. Garrett smiled. Sounds familiar. They walked back toward the command building. Cass clutched the folder like it was made of gold. One more thing, Garrett said as they reached the entrance. They're putting you in for a commendation. Silver Star, most likely, for yesterday's actions. The ceremony will be in a few months, probably stateside. Sir, I was just doing my job. That's what every person who's ever earned a Silver Star has said. He put a hand on her shoulder. Let people honor what you did, Brennan. Not for your sake, for theirs. They need to know that extraordinary things are still possible, that legends can still be real. That night, Cass lay in her bunk, reading through her grandfather's service record by flashlight. Page after page of operations she'd never known about. Missions that had helped win the Cold War, one precise shot at a time. There were commendations she'd never seen, letters from commanders praising his skill, recommendations for promotion that he'd consistently turned down. And there, near the back, a handwritten note dated 1990. His retirement papers had been finalized. He was done, moving back to Montana. The note was addressed to his commanding officer. I'm going home to teach my granddaughter everything I know. She's 8 years old and can already hit a target at 300 yards. By the time I'm done, she'll be better than me. That's the only legacy that matters. Cass closed the folder, pressed it against her chest, and let herself cry for the first time since he'd died. The next morning brought a new mission. Listen up. Dalton stood at the front of the briefing room, his team assembled. Cass stood among them now, no longer in the back corner, no longer invisible. We've got actionable intelligence on a Taliban logistics coordinator operating out of a compound near the Pakistani border. This individual is responsible for coordinating weapon shipments, IED components, and fighter movements across the entire eastern region. He brought up a satellite image. The problem is the same as before. He's positioned himself in a location that's almost impossible to assault directly. Steep terrain, multiple defensive positions, civilian presence. Another image appeared. A man in traditional clothing examining what looked like a map. This is Hassan Wardak, high-value target. Command wants him eliminated or captured, preferably eliminated, because capturing him would require assets we don't have available. Ashford spoke up. Range to target? 3,200 yards from the nearest overwatch position. Dalton looked at Cass, well within Steady's capabilities. The use of her new call sign still felt strange, but good strange, like putting on a uniform that actually fit. When? She asked. Dawn tomorrow. We insert tonight, get in position, wait for first light. Wardak has a pattern. Every morning at 0600, he walks the perimeter of the compound. Takes him approximately 4 minutes. That's our window. The mission briefing continued for another hour. Routes, contingencies, rules of engagement, all the standard details that turn strategy into action. But Cass barely heard most of it. Her mind was already working through the calculations. 3,200 yards. She'd made that shot 100 times in competition. Had dropped targets at that range so consistently that event organizers started making her shoot last so the other competitors wouldn't be demoralized. This would be different, though. Not a steel plate. Not a paper target. A human being. Someone's son. Maybe someone's father. But also someone responsible for American deaths. For the IEDs that had killed or maimed dozens. Taking his life would save others. The distinction mattered. The insertion went smoothly. 8 operators moving through darkness like ghosts, covering 12 kilometers of rough terrain in 4 hours. No contact, no complications. By 0200, they were in position on a ridgeline that overlooked the compound. Cass set up the ShyTac while the others established a security perimeter. The ritual of preparation calmed her nerves. Check the weapon, verify the scope, calculate the atmospheric conditions. Temperature, 58 degrees and rising. Wind, 12 miles per hour from the northwest. Humidity, 31%. Barometric pressure, 30.2 inches. She ran the numbers, worked through every variable. By the time dawn started painting the eastern sky pink and orange, she had her solution. Windage, elevation, every adjustment needed to send a bullet exactly where it needed to go. Dalton moved beside her, taking the spotter position. Ready? Ready. Range? 3,217 yards. Wind? 12 miles per hour northwest, gusting to 15. I'm compensating for worst case. Coriolis? 16 inches right. Drop? 93 inches. Time of flight? Approximately 4.2 seconds. He checked his own calculations, nodded. Everything matched. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. We can call in an airstrike. Make this someone else's burden. No, she said. This is what I'm here for. What my grandfather trained me for. To protect people. This Wardak, he's responsible for how many IED attacks? How many American soldiers dead or maimed because of the weapons he moved? She looked at Dalton. Taking his life saves how many others? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Dawn broke fully. The compound below came to life. Guards moving, smoke from cooking fires. Normal morning activity in a place that was anything but normal. At exactly 0600, a figure emerged from the main building, walked with purpose toward the perimeter. Target acquired, Dalton said, confirming identity. He studied the man through his spotting scope, compared the face to the photos they'd been given. Confirmed. That's Wardock. Cass found him in her scope, watched him walk. He moved with confidence, completely unaware that death was watching from 2 miles away. Wind is steady, Dalton said. 12 miles per hour. No gusts right now. Copy. You have the shot. Her heart rate dropped. 68 beats per minute. 64. 60. Wardock stopped walking, turned to look at something. He'd be still for maybe 3 seconds. 58 beats per minute. She waited for the space between heartbeats and fired. The Shitak bucked against her shoulder. The bullet left the barrel at 3,000 feet per second, spinning at 270,000 RPM, beginning its journey through the dawn air. 4.2 seconds. An eternity and an instant. Through the spotting scope, Dalton watched, saw the impact, saw Wardak drop like someone had cut his strings. Confirmed kill, he said. His voice was steady, but Cass could hear something underneath. Not quite admiration, more like a kind of awe tinged with unease. She just killed a man from 2 miles away, made it look routine. Package secured, Garrett's voice crackled over the radio. Nice work, Viper 1. Exfil in 30. They broke down the equipment, moved out. By the time the sun was fully above the horizon, they were 2 kilometers away, moving fast through terrain that would make pursuit nearly impossible. But Cass's mind stayed behind, on that figure crumpling, on the life ended with one precise application of physics and skill. She'd killed 5 men now across 2 days, 5 human beings who'd been alive one moment and gone the next because she'd pulled a trigger. The mathematics was simple: 5 enemies eliminated, dozens of allies protected. But mathematics didn't account for the weight that settled in her chest, the knowledge that she'd become very, very good at ending human life from impossible distances. Back at base, after the debrief, after the backslaps and congratulations, Cass found herself alone in the armory again, cleaning the Shitak, going through the ritual that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. Steady. Ashford stood in the doorway. The young corporal who'd been the first to show her respect, who'd asked genuine questions during her preparation for the first shot. Corporal, can I ask you something? Sure. He moved closer, sat down on a crate. How do you do it? Make it look so easy? It's not easy. It's just practice. No, I mean, he struggled for words. You killed a man today from 2 miles away, and you looked like you were filing paperwork. No hesitation, no emotion, just math and execution. She set down the cleaning rod. What do you want me to say? That I feel terrible? That it haunts me? I don't know, something, anything. My grandfather told me that the moment you hesitate, the moment you let emotion into the equation, you've stopped being effective. You become a liability. She looked at Ashford. Every person I've killed in the past 2 days was responsible for American deaths. Wardock alone coordinated attacks that killed or wounded dozens. So no, I don't feel terrible. I feel like I did my job. And that's enough? She considered the question, really considered it. I don't know. Ask me in 20 years. Right now, I'm choosing to believe that intention matters. That saving lives by taking lives is different than taking lives for its own sake. She paused. That distinction has to mean something, has to be real. And if it's not, then I'll deal with that when the time comes. She returned to cleaning the rifle. Right now, I have a job. I'm good at it. And people are alive because I do it well. Ashford nodded slowly. Fair enough. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I think your grandfather was right. You are protecting people. I've seen real killers, men who enjoy the work. You're not one of them. After he left, Cass sat in the silence, running her hands over the Shytax stock. The weapon that had become an extension of herself. The tool that transformed mathematics into mortality. She thought about her grandfather, about all the shots he'd made over 2 wars and 20 years of classified operations.
Had he struggled with these questions? Or had his generation simply accepted that war required killing and moved on? The answer didn't matter. She wasn't her grandfather, wasn't any generation but her own. She'd have to find her own peace with what she did. Outside, the Afghan sun beat down on a base where warriors prepared for the next mission, where young men and women far from home tried to make sense of a war that never quite made sense. And in the armory, Cassandra Brennan finished cleaning her rifle, packed it away with the care of someone who understood that tools deserved respect, and walked out into the light. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new calculations, new shots that she'd make look routine. But tonight, she'd allow herself to be human, to feel the weight of what she'd done, to honor the complexity of being both protector and destroyer. She pulled out her grandfather's leather notebook, opened it to the first page. And there, in handwriting that had grown shaky with age but never lost its precision, were the words she needed to see. For Cassandra, when your moment comes, trust your training. Love, Flint. She had trusted it, trusted the mathematics, the preparation, the countless hours of practice. What she was still learning to trust was herself, the woman who could end lives from distances most people couldn't comprehend, the quiet professional who'd finally stopped being invisible, the legend in the making who'd give anything to be just Cass again. Just the girl from Montana who'd loved shooting because it brought her closer to her grandfather, not because it made her good at killing. But that girl was gone now, left behind on a ridgeline 4,200 yards from where the impossible became routine. In her place stood something else, someone else, steady, the woman who never missed. 6 months changed everything and nothing. Cass stood at the front of a classroom at Fort Benning, Georgia, looking out at 35 faces that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. 33 men, 2 women, all of them wondering why the Army had assigned a 27-year-old female sergeant with no official sniper school credentials to teach the most advanced marksmanship course in the United States military. March 2012, spring in Georgia, which meant humidity that made Montana seem like a desert, and temperatures that climbed by the hour. The students sat in their chairs, arms folded, waiting for her to prove she belonged here. She recognized the look, had seen it on Dalton's face 6 months ago, on every operator at Fob Chapman who dismissed her as the coffee girl. The look that said, prove it or get out. My name is Sergeant Cassandra Brennan, she said, her voice carried across the room without strain. 6 months of combat operations had burned away any hesitation. Call signs steady. I'm your primary instructor for extreme long-range marksmanship. One of the male students, a staff sergeant with combat patches from 3 deployments, raised his hand. Sergeant Brennan, what's your personal record? 4,217 yards, confirmed kill. Eastern Afghanistan, September 2011. The room went silent. Even the skeptics knew what that number meant. The longest confirmed sniper kill in United States military history. A shot that had been classified for months and only recently declassified enough to be discussed in training environments. Bullshit, someone muttered from the back row. Cass smiled. Let's go find out. 20 minutes later, they stood at the Fort Benning long-range facility, the finest military shooting range in the country, capable of supporting shots out to 3,000 yards. She'd requested they set up a target at the maximum distance, 2,850 yards. just over 1.6 miles.
The students watched as she set up the Shytak M200, the same rifle she'd used in Afghanistan, the weapon that had become famous in certain circles. Some of the students were taking photos with their phones, though regulations said they shouldn't. She didn't care. Let them document this. Let them have proof. Extreme long-range shooting isn't about strength, she said as she worked. It's not about aggression or dominance. It's about understanding physics so completely that you can make a bullet do exactly what you want across distances that seem impossible. She loaded a single round, settled into position. The students gathered around with spotting scopes and binoculars, all pointed downrange at the steel plate barely visible in the distance. No calculation on a tablet this time, no grandfather's notebook. Just 14 years of training crystallized into pure instinct. Wind from the east, 8 miles per hour. Temperature, 76 degrees. Humidity, 52%. Barometric pressure holding steady. She ran the numbers in her head. Windage, elevation, Coriolis drift. Everything that mattered compressed into a solution that took seconds to compute. Her heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to scope and target and the space between heartbeats. She fired. 4.1 seconds of flight time. The bullet arced through Georgia air, dropping, drifting, compensating for every force acting upon it. The steel plate rang out clear and sharp across the range. First shot. Perfect hit. When she stood and turned around, every face had changed. The skepticism was gone. In its place, something between respect and disbelief. Any questions? She asked. Every hand went up. The training was brutal. Not physically, though the heat and humidity took their toll. Mentally brutal. Psychologically brutal. She pushed them harder than any instructor they'd ever had, because she knew what the job required. Dalton had told her once that the difference between a good sniper and a great one wasn't the shooting. Any competent marksman could learn to hit targets at distance. The difference was the patience, the ability to lie perfectly still for hours, to calculate and recalculate as conditions changed, to wait for the perfect moment and then execute without hesitation. She taught them mathematics that made their heads hurt. Atmospheric physics, ballistic coefficients, the Magnus effect, and how spin drift affected bullet trajectory. She made them calculate shots until they could do the math in their sleep. But more than that, she taught them patience. Your enemy is time, she told them during a field exercise. They'd been lying prone for 6 hours waiting for a target to appear downrange. Half of them were fidgeting, uncomfortable, ready to quit. You think 6 hours is a long time? In Afghanistan, I waited 10 hours for one shot. Didn't move, didn't eat, barely breathed. Because the moment I'd been preparing for required absolute stillness, absolute focus. She walked among them. The Taliban isn't patient. Al-Qaeda isn't patient. They move, they expose themselves, they make mistakes, but only if you're patient enough to wait for them. One of the female students, a Marine Lance Corporal named Rivera, spoke up. Sergeant, how do you stay focused that long? How do you keep from losing your edge? You think about why you're there. Not about the discomfort, not about the boredom. You think about the people you're protecting, the lives that depend on you making that shot when the moment comes. Cass stopped walking. My grandfather told me that patience is a weapon most soldiers don't know how to use. He was right. If you can master patience, you become more dangerous than any weapon system the military can build. They trained for 12 weeks, dawn to dark, 6 days a week. By the end, all 35 students could calculate extreme range shots in their heads, could compensate for wind, drop, drift, and a dozen other variables without conscious thought. More importantly, they learned to wait, to be still, to let the world move around them while they remained focused on the one thing that mattered. On graduation day, Dalton showed up as guest speaker. He'd been promoted to Master Sergeant, was running his own training program now. Cass hadn't seen him since leaving Afghanistan in December. Sergeant Brennan, he said, shaking her hand. Heard good things about your program. Thank you, sir.
Stop calling me sir. We're the same rank now, he smiled. Well, technically, you outrank me by time in service. They watched the graduation ceremony together. 35 students receiving their advanced sniper qualification. 35 soldiers who'd been transformed by training that pushed them past what they thought possible.
You've created something here, Dalton said quietly. A program that's already changing how we approach long-range engagement. Command is talking about making this mandatory for all sniper school graduates. It's not my program, it's my grandfather's. I'm just passing it on. Don't sell yourself short. What you're teaching, the patience and discipline and pure skill, that's not in any manual. That's all you. He paused. I wanted to apologize again for how I treated you. I've been thinking about it a lot. You already apologized in Afghanistan. I know, but I don't think you understand how much of an asshole I was, or why. He looked at her. I was threatened by you, by the possibility that you might be better than me. So I dismissed you, made you invisible. Because if I didn't see you, I didn't have to confront the fact that my ego was more important than the mission. Dalton, let me finish. What you did in Afghanistan, those shots you made, they saved lives. But they also taught me something. That the best operators aren't the ones with the biggest egos. They're the ones with the most skill and the least need to prove it. He extended his hand again. So thank you for teaching me humility and for showing me what real professionalism looks like. She shook his hand. You're a good man, Wyatt Dalton. You were then, you're better now. We're all better because of you. That night, alone in her quarters, Cass opened her laptop and started writing an email she'd been composing in her head for months. It was addressed to her mother, a woman she'd barely spoken to in the past 6 years. Distance and silence had built walls between them after her grandfather's death, walls that Cass was finally ready to tear down. She wrote about Afghanistan, about the shots that had changed everything, about the training program she was building, about how everything she'd become could be traced back to those long afternoons in Montana high country, learning patience and precision from a man who'd believed in her when no one else did. She wrote about forgiveness, about understanding, about how she finally grasped why her mother had been so angry when Cass enlisted. Not because military service was wrong, but because her mother had already lost a husband to war and couldn't bear the thought of losing a daughter, too. The email took 2 hours to write. When she finally hit send, she felt lighter than she had in years. 3 months later, at the Pentagon, Cass stood in dress uniform while a 2-star general pinned the silver star to her chest. The citation read, "For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States in Afghanistan." Sergeant Cassandra Brennan, through exceptional marksmanship skill and tactical acumen, neutralized 4 high-value targets and disabled 14 enemy vehicles, directly enabling the successful rescue of an American hostage and preventing significant friendly casualties. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself and the United States Army. Her mother sat in the front row. They'd reconciled slowly, carefully, over email and phone calls, and finally a weekend visit where they'd talked through everything. The anger, the fear, the love that had always been there but couldn't find words. Beside her mother sat Colonel Garrett, retired now but still carrying himself like he owned every room he entered. And next to him, Master Sergeant Wyatt Dalton, grinning like a proud older brother. The ceremony was brief, military precision applied to military pageantry. When it ended, reporters wanted interviews. She gave them. Answered questions about training and preparation and what it felt like to make the longest shot in American military history. What she didn't tell them was how it felt to carry that distinction. To know that she'd ended lives from distances so great that her targets never knew death was coming. To be celebrated for skills that, in any other context, would be terrifying. Among the audience sat a man she almost didn't recognize. Graham Aldridge. Thinner than she remembered, gray at the temples now, but alive. Very much alive. He approached after the reporters dispersed. "Sergeant Brennan," he extended his hand. "I owed you my life. Wanted to say thank you in person." She shook his hand. "You're welcome, Mr. Aldridge. Just doing my job." "No." His grip tightened. "What you did was extraordinary.
My wife, my daughters, they have their husband and father because of you. That's not just a job. He released her hand, pulled out a card. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. That's a debt I can never fully repay. CIA, Senior Intelligence Officer. She nodded, tucked the card away. I hope I never have to, sir, but thank you. The offer stands, forever. He glanced at the silver star on her chest. Well deserved, Sergeant. More than deserved. After he left, Cass looked at the card once more before putting it in her pocket. One life saved, a family kept whole. Whatever doubts she carried about her choices, this moment made them lighter. After the ceremony, she drove north, left Washington, D.C. behind, and headed for Montana, the ranch where everything had started. The place where her grandfather had turned a young girl with good eyes and steady hands into something extraordinary. The ranch looked smaller than she remembered. 15 years of growth and change had shifted her perspective. But the mountains were the same. The wind carried the same smell of sage and pine. And the shooting range her grandfather had built, marked by steel plates at various distances, was still there. She parked the truck, got out, walked to the edge of the property where a simple headstone marked her grandfather's grave. No military cemetery for Samuel Flint Brennan. He'd requested burial here, on the land he loved, overlooking the mountains where he taught his granddaughter to see the wind. Cass knelt beside the grave, set the silver star on the headstone next to his Korean War medals that had been mounted in a weatherproof case. I beat your record, Grandpa, she said quietly. 4,217 yards. Eastern Afghanistan, September 2011. They're calling it the longest confirmed sniper kill in U.S. military history. The wind moved through the trees, carried the sound of distant water and the cry of a hawk circling overhead. You were right about everything. About patience being a weapon. About understanding physics better than trying to muscle through with power. About waiting for the moment that matters. She touched the headstone. About me being better than you. She sat there for a long time, feeling the sun in her face and the Montana wind she'd grown up with, thinking about all the shots she'd made, all the calculations, all the lives ended and lives saved. I'm teaching now, she continued, passing on what you taught me. There are 35 new snipers out there who can make shots they never thought possible, and there'll be 35 more after them, and 35 after that. She paused. Your legacy isn't just me. It's everyone I teach, everyone they teach, the knowledge multiplying like a stone thrown into still water. She stood, pulled the old .308 from her truck, the rifle her grandfather had used to first teach her at age 8, the same rifle she'd fired on her 11th birthday and hit that target at 800 yards. She walked to the shooting range, set up at the position she'd used 1,000 times as a child. The target was 1,500 yards downrange, a steel plate, 12 inches in diameter, rusted now but still functional. She loaded around, settled into position, felt the wind, calculated without thinking, and fired. The rifle kicked, the bullet flew, the plate rang. Perfect hit. She smiled. Ejected the spent casing and caught it, held it in her palm like a prayer. Still got it, she whispered. Behind her, a voice. I never doubted you would. She turned. Her mother stood there, hands in her pockets, looking older than Cass remembered, but smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years. Mom, I didn't know you were coming up. Followed you from D.C. Figured you'd come here. Her mother walked closer. Your grandfather would be so proud of you. I hope so. I know so. He talked about you constantly those last years, about how you were going to be the best shooter who ever lived. I thought he was just being a proud grandpa. She touched Cass's shoulder. Turns out he was right. They stood together looking out at the mountains, mother and daughter, both of them shaped by the same man in different ways. I'm sorry I was so angry when you enlisted, her mother said. I was just terrified of losing you like I lost your father. I know. Do you? Really? Because I don't think I ever explained it properly. Your father died when you were 5. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. And then my father, your grandfather, he became everything to you, your teacher, your mentor, your hero. And I was just there in the background, watching you become someone I didn't understand. Cass felt tears threatening. Mom, let me finish. When he died, I thought maybe I'd get my daughter back. But instead, you enlisted, followed his path, became even more like him. She paused. It took me a long time to understand that you weren't choosing him over me. You were honoring him, continuing his legacy, and that's beautiful. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. They embraced, held each other while the Montana wind carried away years of misunderstanding. Come on, her mother said. I made pot roast, your grandfather's recipe. We can eat and you can tell me everything. Not the classified parts, just the parts about who my daughter has become. That night, over dinner in the ranch house kitchen, Cass told stories about Afghanistan, about Dalton and his transformation from antagonist to ally, about teaching at Fort Benning, about the students who arrived skeptical and left transformed. Her mother listened, asked questions, laughed at the right moments, and slowly the distance between them dissolved. What's next? Her mother asked as they cleared the dishes. More teaching? Back to combat? I don't know. Command is talking about making me permanent staff at Fort Benning, building an entire program around extreme long range marksmanship. It would mean stability, safety, a chance to shape the next generation. But, but part of me misses the field, misses the clarity of it, the simplicity of having one job and doing it perfectly. She paused. Does that make me a bad person? Missing combat? Her mother considered the question. Your grandfather used to say that warriors aren't bad people. They're people who found their purpose in protecting others. As long as that remains true, as long as you're fighting for the right reasons, there's no shame in missing it. He said that? Many times, especially after he retired. He struggled with it for years. The transition from warrior to civilian. Eventually, he found a new purpose in teaching you. Maybe that's what you're facing now. Finding purpose outside of combat. Cass nodded slowly. Maybe. 18 months later, Fort Benning had been transformed. The Advanced Long Range Marksmanship program now occupied an entire building. 12 instructors, all trained by Cass. Among those 12 was Staff Sergeant Finn Ashford. The young corporal from Afghanistan had requested transfer to Fort Benning 2 months after Cass arrived. Now 25, he'd become one of her most effective teachers, patient, thorough, with a gift for helping struggling students find their focus. You've come a long way, Ashford, Cass told him during a break between classes. Had a good teacher, Sergeant, he smiled. Afghanistan changed me. Watching you work, the way you stayed calm under that kind of pressure, it showed me what real professionalism looked like. Made me want to be better. You are better. Your students' scores prove it. Because I teach them what you taught me. That excellence isn't about talent. It's about discipline, patience, doing the work when no one's watching. He paused. Still think about that conversation we had, about intention mattering, about being a protector. I get it now. Really get it. Took me a while to understand it too. Well, you figured it out, and now you're helping the rest of us figure it out. He glanced at the students filing into the next class. That's the real legacy, isn't it? Not the record, the multiplication. My grandfather would have liked you, Ashford. I wish I could have met him, but I'm honored to help carry on what he started. Facilities that could support shots out to 4,000 yards. Students from every branch of service and several allied nations. Cass, now Master Sergeant Brennan, ran it all. She'd been promoted ahead of schedule, her record in Afghanistan and her teaching success accelerating her career in ways that would have been impossible without extraordinary circumstances. The program graduated classes every 3 months, 40 students per class. Over 500 graduates in the first year and a half.
snipers who carried her grandfather's lessons into conflicts around the world. On this particular morning, she stood at the front of a classroom, teaching ballistics to a new group of students. 20 men, 20 women. The military had changed. Her success had helped change it. Female snipers were no longer unusual. They were expected, celebrated when they excelled. Among the students sat a young private first class who reminded Cass of herself at that age. Quiet, focused, absorbing every word like her life depended on it. Her name was Sarah Dalton, Wyatt Dalton's daughter. After class, Cass called her over. "Private Dalton, good work today." "Thank you, Sergeant." "Your father tells me you've been shooting since you were 12. "Yes, Sergeant. He taught me. Said it was important I learn from the beginning. Do it right the first time." Cass smiled. "Sounds like something he'd say. He's become a good teacher."
He learned from the best. Sarah met her eyes. He talks about you a lot. About Afghanistan. About how you showed him what real skill looked like. Your father is being too generous. I don't think so, Sergeant. I think he's being honest. Sarah paused. I want to be like you. Not exactly like you. I know that's not realistic, but I want to be that good, that precise, that patient. Why? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Why? Why do you want to be a sniper? It's not about the glory. There isn't any. It's not about the recognition. Most of our work is classified. So why? Sarah thought about it. Because I want to protect people. I want to be the person who can make the impossible shot when everything depends on it. I want to save lives by being better than anyone expects. Cass nodded slowly. Good answer. Keep that reason close. You'll need it on the hard days. The training continued, week after week, month after month. Cass watched Sarah Dalton transform from a competent shooter into something exceptional, watched her absorb the lessons, apply the mathematics, develop the patience that separated good snipers from great ones. In Sarah, Cass saw herself, saw the same hunger to prove that skill mattered more than size or strength or gender, the same determination to be invisible until the moment invisibility no longer mattered. History repeating itself, legacy continuing. On graduation day, Sarah Dalton scored the highest marks in her class, made shots that other students missed, demonstrated patience that impressed even the instructors. Wyatt Dalton attended the ceremony, stood in the back trying not to be obvious about wiping his eyes when his daughter received her qualification. Afterward, the three of them stood together outside the training facility. "You did good, kid," Dalton told his daughter. "Real good." "Thanks, Dad. Couldn't have done it without Sergeant Brennan." "No," Cass said. "You did this yourself. I just showed you the path. You walked it." Dalton looked at Cass. My daughter becoming a sniper. Never thought I'd see the day. Definitely never thought I'd be proud of it. The world changes, Cass said. We change with it. Yeah. He put his arm around Sarah. Thanks for teaching her. For teaching all of them. For building something that's going to outlast all of us. As they walked away, father and daughter talking and laughing, Cass felt something settle in her chest. A sense of completeness, of purpose fulfilled. This was the legacy her grandfather had wanted. Not just her own skill, but the multiplication of it. The knowledge spreading. Warriors created who would protect others with patience and precision, and the understanding that sometimes one perfect shot could save dozens of lives. That evening, she drove back to her quarters, sat at her desk, and opened her grandfather's notebook. The leather was worn now, soft from years of handling. The pages filled with his handwriting and her own notes added over time. She turned to the last page, the one that had been blank when he'd given it to her, the one she'd been saving for the right moment. She picked up a pen and wrote, "Grandpa, today I watched the 500th student graduate from the program we built. Your program. Your knowledge passed through me to them, multiplied and spread until it's changed how the entire military thinks about long-range engagement. I beat your record, made the longest shot in history. got the medal you never wanted for yourself, became the legend you always said I'd be. But the real achievement isn't the shot. It's this: the teaching, the legacy, the knowledge that your wisdom will continue long after I'm gone. You taught me patience, you taught me precision, but most importantly, you taught me that the best warriors are the ones who create other warriors, who pass on what they know instead of hoarding it. I'm not the best shooter in the world anymore. Some of my students have surpassed me, and that's exactly how it should be. Your legacy isn't me, it's all of us. Every sniper who calculates wind drift in their head, every operator who waits patiently for the perfect shot, every life saved by precision applied at impossible distances. Thank you for believing in the quiet ones. Thank you for teaching me to wait for the moment that matters. Thank you for showing me that legends aren't born, they're made, one perfect shot at a time. Love, Cass. She closed the notebook, set it on the shelf beside her bed where it lived now, a reminder, a talisman, a piece of her grandfather that she'd carry forever. Outside, the Georgia night was warm and humid, nothing like Montana. But she'd learned to call this place home, learned to find purpose in teaching instead of combat, learned that there were many ways to serve. Her phone buzzed. A message from Colonel Garrett. Saw the graduation numbers. Your grandfather would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. Keep building what you're building, Steady. The military needs more teachers like you. She smiled, typed back. Roger that, sir. Will do. Another message came in, this one from her mother. Thinking about you tonight, about Dad, about how he'd be bragging to everyone about his granddaughter, the legend. I'm bragging enough for both of us. Love you. Love you too, Mom. A third message. Wyatt Dalton. Sarah won't shut up about you. Says you're the best instructor she's ever had. Maybe promise to tell you thank you again, so thank you for everything. She's going to be better than both of us, Cass typed back. Just wait. She set the phone down, looked at the metal case on her wall, the silver star gleaming under the overhead light. Next to it, in a simple frame, a photo of her grandfather in his Marine uniform. Young, serious. Those gray eyes that she'd inherited staring into a future he couldn't have imagined. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new chances to pass on what she'd learned, to multiply the legacy that had been given to her. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply be, to feel the weight of everything accomplished, to honor the journey from invisible armorer to legendary instructor. The wind outside carried the scent of pine trees from the base's landscaping. Not Montana pine, but close enough. She breathed it in, let it fill her lungs. Let it remind her of home and heritage and the old man who'd shaped her into something extraordinary. I did it, Grandpa, she whispered to the empty room. I beat your record, built your legacy, became exactly what you said I would. And somewhere, in whatever space exists between memory and hope, she could have sworn she heard his voice. I always knew you had it in you, little one. Now go show them what patience and precision can do. Show them that legends are real. She smiled, turned off the light, and rested. Because tomorrow, the work would continue. The legacy would grow. And somewhere in America, a young girl with steady hands and sharp eyes was learning to shoot from a grandmother or grandfather or parent who believed that skill mattered more than size. Another quiet professional in the making. Another legend waiting for the moment when invisibility no longer mattered. Another protector learning that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the patience to wait for the shot that changes everything. The cycle continued. The legacy lived on. And Cassandra, Steady, Brennan slept soundly, knowing that her grandfather's dream had become real. One perfect shot at a time. Cassandra Steady Brennan's record stood until 2017, when a British sniper in Iraq made a confirmed kill at 3,540 meters, 3,871 yards. Cass sent him a congratulatory letter. Records, she wrote, were meant to be broken. Legacy was meant to be built upon. By 2025, over 2,000 snipers had graduated from her program. 3 had surpassed her distance record.
Dozens had saved lives using techniques she taught them. The Advanced Long Range Marksmanship program became the gold standard for extreme distance shooting worldwide. And on a ranch in Montana, a steel plate at 4,217 yards still bears the mark of the shot that changed everything. Some say on quiet days, when the wind is right, you can still hear it ring.